Hi, this is Sandy from the So-and-So in Glendora, California. Today we're going to talk about some so kind of wonderful patterns and their rulers. There's a mini ruler and then there's a bigger ruler. It'd be helpful if I held it to you right size. So it's the same concept, it's just a bigger ruler. I'm going to be primarily working with the mini one today and showing you some projects that we have already completed in the store, and then a way to show you how to use the ruler so that you're comfortable going home and doing it on your own. So I'm going to start with this first pattern in the book called Early Risers. And I'm just being kind of weird about not showing you the measurements and whatnot, because that's copyrighted material, so I can't show you that. But I can show you the pieces that I've cut and show you how to cut with these rulers. So one of the shapes, there's several different shapes, and one of the shapes, of course I just covered it up. One of the shapes is a rectangle that you cut. Here it is. And cut. I'll need my cutting board. There we go. One of them is a rectangle. And you cut out of both ends of the rectangle. So pretend with me this is a rectangle. This is the other piece that came out of that. Then I'm going to flip it around and do the other corner. So I'm going to use my ruler that of course I buried. And it's all in the positioning of the ruler that gives you that accommodates the different sizes that you need. So in this one, I need to line up, here I'll take my tape off because I'll need that later, and that's just me that needs that. You probably won't need that. I have some spatial awareness issues that I have to overcome, and it just helps me to put tape on there. So for this rectangle piece, I'm so sorry. For this rectangle piece, I'm being instructed to put this dotted line on the corner of my rectangle. And then I'm going to cut in this circle. This half circle, I should say. This is scrap. I'll put it over here with the rest of my scraps. And this is the shape you end up with. And then you're going to sew that on to another shape that you've cut in a different application. But I will show you that in just a very little bit, because I have this all set for us. And this is yet one more square that they use when they're making these, and it's a half square triangle. So you create a half square triangle, and then using my block lock ruler, I am going to trim that to I believe, yes, I'm going to trim this to a 5-inch square. So when you use the block lock ruler, my memory tells me to put the logo in the lower part of my half square triangle. So the logo in the lower, and then I butt that edge right up against that seam, and then maneuver the ruler so that I can get a 5-inch square out of this. And then I'm going to trim these two sides. And then I'm going to flip it around and maneuver the ruler up against this clean cut that I just did, so that I get a 5-inch cut down here. Okay, we have to stop. So now I've spun it around. Now my logo is on the upper, and then I'm going to trim my 5 inches on one side and my 5 inches on the other. I love using my block lock ruler for trimming my squares. It makes it go so much faster than trying to line up the right spot all the time. So the block lock ruler is something you don't need to have, but it makes your sewing a little easier. So now that I've created this square, I am going to use my mini ruler to create another square. Pardon me, I'm going to have a cutout part. So I'm going to take this and lay it on here in such a way that that same edge is lined up on the side. And then I'm going to cut along here. And then this piece is discarded. I don't need this piece for the application that I'm working on. But this piece this piece is going to get sewn on to here. And so when we sew curves, it starts out, you're a little flummoxed by how you're going to make this happen. But when you follow the instructions, you just place it about 1/2 inch lower than that, and then take it over to your machine. And sew a 1/4 inch seam. So I'm lining those up, and I'm just sewing along that 1/4 inch. I'd like you to know the first time I did this, I pinned the bejesus out of this piece, and it didn't turn out very well. I had all sorts of tucks, and it just was not very nicely done. And so then I read the instructions, and it said, just grab hold of each end and sew your curve. And so that's what I did, and then I had great success. So I'm going to lift that up and bring it over. And you can see that it doesn't look very good. I mean, you wouldn't want that. But when we press it, it removes all the uck. The best thing about this method is that then we trim this. And so though it looks a little funky right now, we're going to trim it . My ruler. This is just like at home. I can't find the ruler I was working with. This is black. This is the big one. I'm looking for the mini one. So I'm going to trim this by once again positioning it just the way it's supposed to be. And then on this one, I am cutting a 4-inch square. So the instructions tell me to line my ruler up so that 1/8 of an inch is extending beyond that design pad, that design fabric. So I position it to get that 1/8, and I'm at 4 and 4, which is where I like to have my tape because I get a little turned around sometimes. And then I'm going to trim that and trim that. And then I'm going to leave my ruler the way it is and turn my square around and line that 4 inches up again. So I've got 4 inches here and 4 inches here. And I'm going to trim. Sorry about that. And then I end up with the shape that I need in order to, I've already done one shape like this, so you can see that. And this is the bottom of my tulip. So then I'm going to sew this together. And this is just a straight stitch, straight seam, pardon me. And so when I press this, and then I'm to press it open on the back. This becomes the lower part of my tulip, and this becomes the upper, whoops, the upper part of my tulip. Once I sew that other piece together, I will then have the other portion of this tulip. So you can see if I were to just lay this over this tulip that's already done, once your pieces are created, then it's just a matter of sewing your pieces together. So this is the bottom of the tulip, this is half of the top of the tulip, and then it's just a matter of putting all your pieces together. Once you have the squares created, then you're just laying them out to complete that. I also have the leaves to sew, so we will do that next. Of course, I have to find them, but in the they're there. In the meantime, this is another pattern from this book. It's called Bat Moon Rising. It's fantastic for the Halloween season. Yes. So this is in the book as well, and here's a sample that we have done in the store. So I've already created some sample squares just so you can see that once these squares are completed, it's truly just a matter of laying them out. So this would go right here. And then this, I mean, this is just a 4-inch square, but that would go underneath it, and you'd sew that together. And then this is one of the bat pieces. You can, you can see that this would go right here, and this one would go. This one would go right here. So all of these would then, once your squares are ready to go, you're ready to create the quilt top.
Pause. Can you pause?
So talking about the leaves, the lower portion of these, we just did the upper tulip, part of the tulip, and now we're going to do the leaves. And so I have already done all of the square creation, if you will, and I then would just lay these down according to the pattern. Now I'd like you to know that I really do have some spatial awareness issues, and so while I was sewing this, I took this and put it right in front of my face so I would do the right thing. Well, guess what? I have some leaves that are not exactly correct, but leaves in nature are not always the same either, so I'm leaving them that way. This one is correct, and so I'm going to take this one and line it up here, and one of these shapes and line it here, and one of these shapes and line it up here, and this one would go like this, and this one would go like this, and then the piece in the middle, and I have one more piece right here. So then you would sew these with this piece and this piece in position. You would sew those together just like you would a normal square. You would sew these two together, these two, until you were able to figure that out and get that portion of it done. It's truly just a matter of creating your squares and then laying it out as a pattern, just like we do with every other quilt. We make log cabin square quilts, and then we lay them out. We make we make rail fence quilt squares, and we lay them all out and put them all together. So you're first creating the square, and then you're laying it out so that you can sew them together into blocks. We have several other samples from this book, and then some not from the book. So I'd like to take you on a little tour of some of our other completed projects. so that you can see the other things you can do. Way up in the front of the store, we have this, it's called Freedom's Flag. We have this hanging up in the front window. And then here we have a wonderful selection of the rulers. Here's the mini that I was working with. Here's the larger one that I also have, and here's the Curve It ruler. Then we have these great patterns. Look at Mr. and Mrs. Claus. We have a cow and a sheep. Then we have the Nativity, which we also have completed on the wall behind the pattern itself. And then around the corner we have Miss Posh Pocus, who is also an amazing one for Halloween. And so that is a great introduction to the So Kind of Wonderful rulers and some of the patterns that we have here in the store. Thank you so much for your attention. I hope this interests you and you are willing to try. So thank you again. I'll look forward to seeing you at the So-and-so.